We are still doing a whole series on purpose, and what we're doing is bringing in the other tools as they relate to purpose. And last Sunday we looked at the pendulum as a way of protecting purpose. So we looked at almost as a way of, a necessary way of protecting purpose, because our purpose is something we can get high on, whether it's high of enthusiasm or high of anxiety or fear that we might be losing out. And those swings of the pendulum will place our relationship to our purpose in jeopardy. That's sort of a quick, what we looked at last week. What I want to look at here, and it's quite dense, so we're going to run it over this Sunday and next Sunday, the same topic. And that is purpose and the life forces. You know, a theme of these forums, a theme of presenting the Pelham material, is the claim we make that the tools are robust, and in that sense, practical, but they're also accurate, and they're accurate with a lot of theory around them. And I think the accuracy of the tools comes into this teaching Sunday, which is, you know, the life forces, the caring life force, which is the part of us that can care for other people and enable people to change. It's a part of ourselves that will carry doubt and vulnerability. And the caring life force, David called it rejectiveness. So in the caring life force, we are prone to feel rejected. If only one person came to the forum, I'd take it personally, right? That's my rejectiveness. When I used to run programs in Italy, and I really got in touch with my rejectiveness, because people would say, "Oh, you're going to teach this evening, Peter?" And I'd say, "Yes." And half the people would leave. Now, I knew they were going away to get their notebooks, okay? But I still felt it, okay? I still sort of felt that feeling, they don't love me anymore. Yeah, I guess there is something about the caring life forces where we are prone to nobody loves me anymore. We are prone to my work is not valued, whatever, you know. We are prone to doubt ourselves. And as I think I will expand on it directly right now. And I have touched on it here before, but I want to establish it very clearly that when I heard, I didn't like him at first. And I was sort of pretty arrogant. And who did this untogether guy, what did this very untogether guy have to teach me? I think that was my initial reaction to David Pelham. And then because my boss gave me a very direct instruction that I was to take these lectures, not quite my job depended on it, but a bit close. And the first thing that grabbed me of David was the truth line, that we only have a tiny part of the truth. I thought that was stunning. I still think it's stunning. I still don't see other thinkers in my field of work having that degree of sophistication. They want to say, you know, they've got the new answer, the new formulation, the new syndrome, and they will reduce everything to that. So that was the first bit. But the second bit, when he taught the caring life force, what he called rejectiveness, it really answered for me how these really sort of big and admired guys who had great followings and perhaps had written a lot of books weren't that good. Weren't that good as practitioners. I could see that. You know, they weren't necessarily greatly admired, but they weren't necessarily people I would have referred a friend to. I just didn't feel they had. And so, and it perplexed me. And I saw at the same time a parallel thing that went through gurus from the Indian subcontinent or elsewhere, and how often they went corrupt. How often corruption, sexual exploitation, financial exploitation, how often those things creeped in. And that, you know, I wasn't that involved in the gurus, I noticed that in passing, but if the sort of heroes of my field of work weren't that good at the day-to-day job, that perplexed me. And I guess it threw my confidence a bit. And then here this guy comes up with it. They had lost touch with their caring life force. They were into putting on a performance, being famous, going to conferences, publishing books, be in our terms about the performance life force, being admired and applauded. They weren't into putting other people first. They were putting their fame and fortune first. And so I felt this was an insight I had not seen elsewhere. It was there slightly in the, you know, how people would talk about it in a sort of casual conversational way. Well, you've got to be careful not to lose your humanity. And sometimes those that are famous would sort of play lip service. Well, we know that it's people on the front line who are doing the great work. But there wasn't a, they were people initially coming from their caring. Initially, they had the caring life force. That's how they got to be good. But when they hit fame, they slipped into the performance life force. And those of us who are in the caring life force will not handle the performance life force that well. We could almost have a tendency to be corrupted by it rather than someone who was mainly into the performance life force. That was their main thing. Those people will often know how to handle it better. The caring life force is the part of ourselves that can put others before ourselves, can find empathy, compassion's easy. And we are good at getting close to people, and we are good at developing trust. That's what the caring life force is all about. So, you know, David and I turned rejectiveness into caring because I wanted to make the whole of it more teachable, more graspable, and I've done that. That's work. But I mean, that is an example about how someone's purpose is in the caring life force. And it doesn't mean you can't write books and become famous, but if you lose touch with your caring life force, as you lose touch with your ability to have doubts, to be vulnerable, in the Pelham model, to be transparent and honestly transparent. You are, when you lose touch, if you're in the caring profession, when you lose touch with that, you lose touch with the roots of your effectiveness, which in some level are the ability to get people to trust you, to have useful things to say, and to be able to get close to people and be comfortable with that closeness, even when it's difficult. I mean, that's the caring life. And that's the place where people can do effective work as school teachers, nurses, general practitioners, therapists. And it's a part of life where people in other fields of work or other purposes need to have an amount of. If someone's going to go from being a good politician to being a great politician, they will have to have what I call a sliver of performance life force. I'm sorry, a sliver of caring life force. Yeah, otherwise they won't be able to connect with the people who they are leading. And something similar is true in material life force. Someone will need a little bit of caring life force to be able at times understand someone who doesn't always put money first. Enough of it to be able to do that. So that's sort of background to this, and I did want to put in that bit of history.
I just ask a question. So,
yeah.
Because what popped into my mind, someone that I don't want to come in and dominate the conversation, but is there a difference between influencing people and connecting with people? Because a certain politician whose name begins with Trump doesn't connect with people in the caring life force way.
No. But one of the ways the tools gives an explanation of that, one of the attributes of being in the performance life force, people are very good at, some people are very good at faking their into the caring life force, okay? Mm-hmm. And and you often get that, you know. A con man, large or small, will do that. I really care about you, but and because I really care about you, I've got this bridge in New York called the Brooklyn Bridge, and I can sell it to you, and you'll make a fortune. You can sort of fake a certain caring life force thing, and using him because he's hopefully someday a figure in history rather than a figure in current politics, okay? Um, I mean, he can fake carrying life force and get away with it. It that is a good example, you know, looking toward Wednesday, of maybe even analyzing that some more as an example. But that's a good example of how people coming from the performance life force can really give people a sense of purpose and a sense of sustaining purpose. You know, that's a demagogic leader. And, you know, it's that chilling, I think I mentioned it here recently. It may have been elsewhere, but that chilling moment in the film Cabaret, where the young Germans stand up and sing the song. Yeah, and a demagogic leader, I think, could almost be described as someone who has hardly any caring life force, but can fake it, that they do have caring life force. And in some weird alchemy, get inside people and have people devoted to them. And, you know, they have you know, they're ahead of us because, you know, they, with words and with emotions, they can do that. They don't even have to produce the goods. We got to produce, in the caring life force, we got to produce the goods. We're either good at it or we're not good at it. And we're not going to bring in hundreds and thousands and millions. But, you know, we can do a good job. But in terms of purpose, you know, say someone like myself who's developed an approach that's not well known, and particularly David developed an approach that was hardly acceptable. You know, we need more of the solid performance life force and material life force. You know, we need enough funding to keep going to the material life force, and we need enough performance life force to win people over. You know, yes, it's that. And that's where often, in my field of work, often I feel people, which is not my way, but, you know, I probably need to own up that I'm jealous of them. But people come up, and I can be disparaging, people can come up with one idea, and the one idea is the bit they can push. And, you know, someone like myself, no, there's not one idea, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And people need to work out of the bunch of stuff that's around, what'll work for them. But going back to where I wanted to start with this, and that is the accuracy in the life forces, okay? And the accuracy in the life forces. Now, there's all sorts of complexities there, and these are just tools. But there is a place where the caring life force, the performance life force, and the material life force are three different things. You know, it's hand, arm, elbow, and they're not the same. They're not the same thing. They're different. And I think when we can see that difference, we can find an accuracy in it. And from that, yeah, if someone's, purpose is to accumulate money and property, that, they got lots more material life force than anything else. And that is their purpose, to accumulate money and property. And it won't work to confuse that with caring, which is, well, if I've got a lot of property and money, people will love me, or my kids will love me, or my wife will love me because I'm such a good provider. No, they will respect, but they won't love. Love won't come that way. Love's got to come from the caring life force. And it's so frequently in this particular example, a man get really, really confused because they end up being scared of their caring life force, so they can't come from it. And within that, they don't, I think I'd use the way, engender their love from their spouse or their kids. So they're in this sort of, because they're not getting that close. You're going to really get close to people that's in a way that's rewarding and genuine, and is of the nature that develops trust. That's got to come from the caring life force. So, these tools would be a real accuracy in helping the person not have to apologize for the purpose in accumulating wealth and property, but could see that they have to add something to that. And then a practitioner or a therapist in that sort of situation, could draw up metaphors and parallels to teach that. Cynthia.
Well, just in terms of like somebody with material life force, and say you got somebody who's made a lot of money who then uses that money, in part to with philanthropy and stuff like that. Would you consider that part from their caring life force, or is that just the contribution from the material life force?
Well, it's a contribution from a material life force, but I think no, you're really right about that. It's almost desperately trying to find some caring life force, right?
Well, I'm not sure, because
by becoming a philanthropist, but they're doing it from material life force. So I think that's the point you're making it from.
Well, but I mean, traditionally, that's what, I mean, and now it's not necessarily the case, but that's what, like, the Rockefellers, that was what you were supposed to do if you made a lot of money. That, I don't know. I don't know, but I guess I'm, maybe even not necessarily, it's not necessarily desperate, but like a sort of, I don't know. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but I cringed a little bit when you were calling it desperate. So, because I'm thinking that's a good way to, people contribute, when I was working, when my spouse was at a church and I was the thing, people who gave to the church were, sometimes they expected to get too much value for it, but there were some who didn't, who just quietly, this is what you're supposed to do. So that's what I was thinking. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because it's absolutely accurate. No, there's a library near where I live. And it was the first library in England. It's a Carnegie library. The first library in England that Andrew Carnegie, the enormously wealthy American he founded all these libraries all over America, all over the world. So I think at that time in history, they were called the robber barons, and they were in American history. And, they're incredibly ruthless. So when I was saying desperation, I was talking more about people like that, okay? And of course, a lot of them were deeply Christian. So, oh my God, I've got to clean my act up before I die. Yeah, I don't think that's the same. And, there are very wealthy people who give away so much. Bezos' wife and Bill Gates. And I think they're interesting studies in terms of this, okay? Because I imagine some of that philanthropy is coming from a place that they almost want to claim or get in touch with again some of what we call caring life force. I imagine they had some of it once, and they brought about the changes in human communication, and then they became. I imagine some of them almost surprised at how wealthy they became. You know what I mean? I just think it's a place where the tools are useful, because, and it might be the case that they felt, their purpose wasn't that much into making money. That was going to be they were going to make money, and they were very, I'm speculating, but their purpose was to create this technological revolution, which they succeeded in doing. I imagine they had a sense of, it would be better for humankind. And then they became extraordinarily wealthy. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did not necessarily expect that. The degree to their wealth. And then they look around, hey, what am I going to do with it? And some of it, deciding what they're going to do with it is give it away, which is quite extraordinary. But I think it would for the life forces, because I think their purpose was located in the performance life force. Changing the way humankind communicate with each other. And they did it. They did it. And I imagine if they weren't careful, the money could sort of do them in, okay? I mean, that's just me, speculating on it. Yeah, they were smart enough, I think, not to let the money take over. But I think it's a way that I think our caring, material, and performance have something to offer in terms of analyzing philanthropy. Yeah. And because in material life force, there is both in material life force and performance life force, there's a great deal of control, okay, and need for control. And I imagine when they move into philanthropy, they're going to have to give up some control, or it's not going to work. That's my guess. And they probably struggle with that.
Yes, there was many people who gave a lot to the church who also wanted a whole lot of control to go along with that. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I imagine the smart ones give the money, don't try to hold on to control, and then probably because they're not holding on to the control, have a louder voice. Because people feel they're coming from their caring life force, not just, okay, I want my voice heard in the church, and I will buy that. Okay.
Yes, there are some who've done it even after their death, or they do it in wills.
Okay. And that won't work. It's the way the understanding how the life forces are distinctly different, and the accuracy within that difference gives us a chance to look at when we mix them up, it doesn't work. Okay. I'm the sort of person who wants the bank manager to like me. Okay. And all the bank manager wants to do is see the figures. And the person who is in the performance life force needs to be able to hold that space and have it clear. And you've got two, and I said this here before, or maybe not the second one, but these two young athletes, the tennis player and the gymnast, if I'm repeating myself, bear with me, but I've been in my field a really long time, okay? But I have rarely heard a statement that is accurate and useful in my field of work as the young tennis, 23-year-old tennis player, okay? I've been in my field for a decade. She came up with a statement, it's okay not to be okay. And that is just useful and powerful in my field of work. It's okay not to be okay. And then, so she's into, and both of them, they're into their caring life force in a field that is all performance life force with a heavy dose of material life force, not very much caring life force, but you can find it. And they stood up. They stood up and were heard. And particularly the young gymnast, I don't think she could have, maybe she did, maybe she was confident, but that move could have gone against her. I'm not going to perform, I'm going to put my mental health first, which is what she said. And it didn't go against her. And a couple of people in America, right-wing people who've been criticized, have just been slammed very quickly because with huge accuracy, she picked the right time. Pretty big moment. And that's, to me, that is with a background of performance life force, claiming the power of caring life force. That's what both of them have done. But they did it in a way that I couldn't do. you know, there's no question they are mainly performance life force, but they picked this moment and pulled in the power of caring life force, and won, which they like to do because they're in performance life force. They won. So now athletes will be able to say, I'm not going to perform because I've got to look after my mental health. I think that's a big moment. I think that's a big moment. And I'm sure there will be mainly men, but not exclusively men, by a long shot, people who will be fuming because they've lost control. But they can't say it. They can't say it out loud. Yeah. The political power of young women of color. It's very big in them. It's very big in both America and the world right now. But in a way, to stay with the theme, we need the caring. Those of us who are mainly in the caring life force will not have the accuracy to pick the fights, okay? We will tend to pick the fight at the wrong time. It's just not, it's not in our skill set. Fights aren't in our skill set, you know. But people who are coming from the performance life force and the epitome of the performance life force, maybe it's not that surprising that they're good at timing the fights they're going to have. Maybe it goes with the territory of being in the performance life force. And both those moves were also, you know, again, performance life force influence in using caring life force. Because they're saying very clearly they're putting themselves first. They're not putting their teammate first. But somehow or other, and I guess the skill with which they did it would again be performance life force. You know, the skill with which the young tennis player impressed me. You know, it's okay not to be okay. I don't know if she knows that there was I doubt very much whether she knows there was a whole bestseller and movement once, which was I'm okay, you're okay. That's Eric Byrne and games people play, isn't it? Going all the way back. I doubt very much whether she'd know anything about that. But maybe she's, you know, got a sort of unconscious resonance. Because, yeah, I'm okay, you're okay, which is the TA, wasn't it? Transactional analysis, yes. Was not quite, well, it's not, in a way, it's not quite as sophisticated as the statement, it's okay not to be okay. Cynthia.
Well, I don't know if she's part of this, but there's a whole big group. And in fact, I was actually, I actually didn't apply for a job writing for astrology. There's a whole, who comes from that perspective, but there's a whole kind of movement, radical self-care. Out.
Okay.
And
yes.
it's in particularly in it's also part of the intersectionality movement. I only know a little bit about it. I went to an astrology conference. I went to I mean it's in astrology, but it's not just, it's out there,
right.
Beyond, and that you know, it was sort of imported into astrology from the wider community. But yeah, there was a whole big, some of it was pretty interesting, and in terms of radical self-care, like going and talking about it radical. And at least the speaker was very good. She was a very good speaker. I mean, I don't know if I agreed with everything, but she was an extremely good speaker. And she's younger too. I think she was in her 20s, but she was talking about how she's talking about radical from the Latin radix, going to the root, not, you know, that you're going to the root of the societal pressures, particularly for women of color, that go against being able to, although I think men have that issue too in a different way, but that prevents you from being able to do self-care. You know, talking about women who feel like, oh gosh, they don't have time, you know, they don't have time to sit and take a long bath because it's like, you know, there's something wrong with that, you know, and that kind of thing. So I'm just sort of wondering if that movement's influencing that somewhat.
Well, yeah, because I have seen that in passing, you know, radical self-care, and I would imagine that perhaps she was into that. She had that had some influence on her, because the gymnast has said she couldn't have made the move without the tennis player. It's my not being very good with unfamiliar names. I'm not using their names. Okay, I tend to mispronounce them. Yeah, but I imagine that could well be part of it, because it didn't seem that interests me, because I was surprised by it, and I guess it was a question in my mind that was sort of bouncing around. I hadn't even quite articulated, where did this come from, right? So I think you're right. I don't think this came out of nowhere. And that would be very much the sort of thing that, yeah, I reckon that's right. Probable. Yeah. Bring it back, I guess it's finding within which life force our purpose lies, okay? Yeah, I was interested in economics and politics. I didn't know about this sort of field at all, really, until, you know, social work, counseling, Alcoholics Anonymous, foster carers. I didn't know anything about that until I was in my, until I was about 26, 27. So it wasn't sort of, you know, in me. But I realized in the fields I was interested in, I was sort of a bit limited, okay? You know, I like the phrase, not in my skill set, because my son-in-law used it to my daughter. Rob said it to Aisha, when she wanted to buy a really, really rundown place and do it up, because, you know, it'd be good for them financially. And he just said, sweetheart, it's not in my skill set. And that was the end of it. And I just like it, because I feel it's not saying it's not in my skill set is not apologetic. Maybe that's the bit I don't like about it. I like about it, because I guess if you say something is not in my skill set, there's almost a Dave Pellin-like assumption. Well, there are some things in my skill set. Yeah, if someone's got a weakness on one of the life forces, that's when I call it a Dave Pellin thing. If someone's got a weakness in one of the life forces, almost by definition, they've got a strength in one of the other ones. It's a little bit rambly. Back to lesson plan. I think it's important to be able to, oh yes, that example. Yeah, it wasn't in my skill set to be a politician. It wasn't really in my skill set to, be around that world. I just don't have enough performance life for. That I learned years later. So I guess I was sort of a bit struggling until I found my purpose in the caring life force. And that was a result, as I've said here before, of being a camp counselor for the Beverly Hills YMCA on Catalina Island. And all of a sudden I was good at this thing. So I think the finding of purpose itself can be a purpose and can be a very valid purpose. We don't, I guess I could say I got lucky on Catalina Island. I got lucky. Found my life's work. But, some people, the search for purpose and the search for, what do I really want to do? Is a purpose in itself, and a valid one, really valid one. Do you want to come in, Nikki, at all?
It's a teachy thing, isn't it? Got to not do the sharing-y thing. So I'll sort of avoid that. Maybe that's for Wednesday. It just crossed my mind when you say about the tennis player and the gymnast and that, and these things, how it's without realizing. And you say about the book decades ago, and these things all become part of the cultural unconscious, don't they? And they're a contribution like that. And then I just kind of wondered about how much Meghan Markle saying she was going to hurt herself, suicidal, and then just brazenly saying that, whether that was, even though it's a completely different field, nothing, it's still somebody speaking out, isn't it? And then you go further back to, what I think was a big start of something when, everybody was crying their eyes out when Princess Diana died, and all the, the conservative types of people went, oh, what was it? Britain's gone like crybaby mad or something like that, and completely missing the point, not realizing at all that just happened that Princess Diana had so many interesting things going on that therefore there was something about her that spoke to loads of people, and so then she dies tragically in a big trauma, and then it just triggers every individual's personal unprocessed grief about grandma or whoever it was. It's like, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying, I think I've changed the subject. That should be in the national consciousness. That's what that was about, and anyway, I've thought there's a bit of a leap back to a different point, but the bigger point being the same, that these things are in the cultural consciousness, and it changes the next thing and the next thing without anybody realizing.
Yeah. And I guess that what you're saying, the unconscious cultural values, we could say the unconscious cultural memory links here, create the sort of field or the territory within which people will or will not find their purpose. because I think this is, no, I think both these young women have, and you also get it in American women basketball players, professional basketball players. They have the political ambition to have their voice heard, okay? And I think that, I'm guessing here, I don't know, but I think there could really be something between the radical self-care movement and the George Floyd movement, that's sort of coming together, and people have a purpose. My voice will be heard. And all the people I mentioned, well, not George Floyd, but all the people I mentioned were women. So I think there's a purpose there that's about women's power, feminism, the whole thing. I think they're interconnected. So I guess some of these, the interconnection on my side of well, trying to do therapy and develop something in my field outside of the conventional field, and that's hard. You know, hard to have voice. And I think there's a movement that people are going to have their voices, and that's a purpose in itself.
I'm just going to call back in a couple of minutes.
Okay. And I guess in my life, it was almost having the purpose and the freedom to develop the purpose when the field was very, the way we say it, inside the field, it was very experiential. Which, you know, people like therapists and social workers doing their own work on themselves, not just learning theory out of a book. And I guess I've seen the world in which I do my work become more difficult, not easier, just more difficult, because the universities and the professional associations in the helping professions I'm hesitating because I realize this is being recorded. The professional associations became more attached to universities, and that's material life force, you know, the power of a career that's university based. And I guess through it all, and probably, you know, doing these forums, is me claiming some of my performance life force. Because you don't create your own school of thought and practice from the caring life force. So I must have a hunk of performance life force in me, whatever, you know, and claiming that. So I'll be very clear about, you know, this is who we are. I use my performance life force to come up with the two strands, the official strand, the unofficial strand. So, you know, swimming in waters that got rougher. Got to develop some skills. And around performance life force, there is always the a necessity of self-discipline. You know, there's a necessity of being on top of your game. There's a necessity in the performance life force to have enough of a healthy material life force. So, you know, you've got the income and you've got the money organized and you're reliable about your appointment. So people whose purpose is in the caring life force need to bring in the performance life force and the material life force to give themselves security. It's a bit parallel to what I said last week. You know, people need to use the pendulum to protect their purpose. And the way I spoke about the what I call the low calm, which is calm but a bit on the low side. So it's got a tinge of negativity, bitterness, resignation. And that sort of tinge of negativity gives us sort of toughness. You know, it's not the despair or destructive self-doubts of a deep low. You know, it's a calm low. It's just got a little bit of that edgy bit that can really be productive. The calm on it's a bit hard to say, but the calm on its own can be a bit wishy-washy if you're not careful. You know, it can mean no risk. Oh, I understand that what the world is like, so I won't take any risks. You know, people can spend too much time in the calm and lose out on life. That's just a fact. And I guess in that calm low, we can say, okay, I need to be careful of myself in this situation. Yeah, some of you know I went through a very hard time with my professional organization. To put it in recorded words, who wanted to challenge me. I was going through a very hard time. And I developed this little approach for myself. Dress up, turn up, shut up. And I did it. I did it for months. So, you know, I was there. In terms of material life force, I'm not going to walk away from that. And I'm still there. I'm still part of this organization. I could resurface if I wanted to or not. But that was bringing in the material life force, which was saying, you know, screw you, I'm out of here. And a lot of people did that. But I decided, no, I'm going to stay in, even though it's very uncomfortable, because I might sometime be able to be useful. So I'm going to have this spot. I guess having a spot, having a license or a degree or a property, you know, is material life force. Okay. And sometimes without the material life force, we'll fail. You know, I guess the material life force is a rock we're standing on in a rough sea. And if that rock goes, we might go under. And certainly for Pelin, I wanted to survive. So I'm going to need enough material life force from which I can make sure it does survive, make sure it does. Yeah, because material life force, if you remember, is food, clothing, and shelter. There is a way that material life force is, basic survival. It could, I mean, in terms of evolutionary theory, the material life force comes first, the caring life force comes second, because if there's enough food and shelter, then we've got the room to love, which is caring life force. And then performance life force comes third, because you need an excess of food to be able to have people who carve statues. So in terms of purpose, if we have a strong purpose, we'll always need to have enough material life force around. And of course, people in other circumstances, they get someone doing all that, okay? Elizabeth, do you want to come in at all?
Yes. So, I've been thinking a little bit about how purpose can shore up a weak life force, at least temporarily. Sorry about the background noise. There's remodeling.
No problem. No problem.
Anyway, so I've been, one of my weaker life forces, at least right now, is performance life force. And I've, the hardest thing for me is to actually put something on paper and then put it out where other people can read and judge it. But I'm finding that I can always do that for tools for people to use for games. Even though it's very scary, and I always feel awful right after I do it. I've come to expect that there'll be a bit of a high finishing something and putting it out there, and then there'll be a low right after. And I've just got to breathe through it. But that for that purpose, I can do what I can't do for my beadwork, what I can't do for, my own fiction writing. And I'm thinking about how that works and what the limits of it are. Because, at this point, I can only share with a relatively small audience. I'm still not like pushing to promote things I've made.
Yeah.
But I can at least, tell the people in the community about them. I can at least post them. Anyway, that's what I've been thinking.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think it I like the way you said it. It has your characteristic clarity. You know, that purpose could protect a weak life force. And I think that's true for me, because I think my material life force can be quite weak, and my performance life force can be a struggle. And the way you put it, then I think, okay, I'm going to use my purpose to make the 3 phone calls I got to make about money, or I'm going to use it to, you know, get back into, because I've sort of lost it a bit, get back into my ambition about my book on decision making. And that, I mean, technically in the work, that very much led to evaluation strata, right? So evaluating in terms of hurt and purpose. So if I feel too scared to make the money calls, then I can think, okay, but my purpose, you know, is not going to help the book on decisions if I'm worried about this thing all the time, right? It's so I think it can. I think what you're touching on is the strength we can draw from purpose. Now, I think I've said it here once or twice, but not very much. I think I'd like to find a way to say it more often. Anyway, what it is, not being mysterious, is there is a bit of a self-improvement ethos in Pelham that's not always useful, okay? I think it comes from my Australian bit, you know, Dave's aggressive bit, and, you know, I feel, you know, Fritz Perls had a thing of, if we're just in touch with what we're doing and we're accepting it, that's fine. And there was some point of view that he had about Gestalt therapy, and I guess I couldn't do it because of the people I was working with. The people I was working with, it didn't work to say, well, just accept where you are. You know, I mean, if I was being harsh, I could say that you could say that to slaves or an oppressed group. So, you know, so I had to struggle with it. But there's another part of it, which I think we can bring in around purpose and evaluating in terms of hurt and purpose, is, okay, where I am is all right, you know. Yes, Cynthia.
Well, and I'm also thinking about, you know, in terms of being okay where you are, if it's all right. I think a lot depends. I mean, nobody's in a vacuum, and I mean, sometimes it's harder to find help than others, but I mean, there's something about, if you're lacking in one of the life forces and you don't want to push it, you know, that's where teams and families can come in and support you. And you know, somebody, you know, like in a workplace, I use this example a lot, but you know, the social worker is probably not going to be the best at the good social worker is probably not going to be the best at documentation. So you have an office manager in the material life force handling that, so then you can have the person do what they're good at. I mean, if you're all alone, then I guess you gotta figure out a way to make things go. But I mean, I think that there's a certain amount of, I think being able, I don't know, but I'm thinking about having other people around and having a good team or a family or something around you. It makes it easier to to just accept where you are and do what you're good at. And if you
Yeah.
don't have that, then, you know, then you're in trouble. Like there's a lot of lawyers who were terrible, who had great performance life force, sometimes a fair amount of caring life force, but had awful material life forces. You know, they couldn't keep their, it's very common, which is why I used to tell people when they were looking for a lawyer, you know, check out, make sure they've got a good admin assistant. You know?
Okay.
You know, that kind of, and I guess if you have enough material, I guess you need enough material life force to get the money to hire somebody to take care of your material life force. But, you know, I think that there's, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling a bit, but the whole thing is that everybody's, you know, that's why athletes have agents, and, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think what you just said is right. You know, find someone who's good an admin assistant is a powerful statement about the life forces. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to come in at all, Tamar?
Okay, sure. Well, you know, with the Delta goddamn strain that is bedeviling my mind at this moment, I'm being told that the caring life force is something that I need to model by doing everything telehealth and not in the office, for example. And it put me in a real double bind, and I've had to realize that there is something about this virus that just takes us all on a real journey about what it means to be answerable to other people and oneself and sanity. But, you know, I feel like we had a chance to feel more like we were in a time of war, only the enemy was one to all of us. It was a global pandemic and we would all pull together. I was absolutely shocked to discover that the sacrifices we were making didn't feel like we were pulling together with any sense of morale. The morale was incredibly low, and maybe because of the nature of this thing, which is that we needed to be in our homes and away from each other and socially distant, but it didn't feel like we could literally pull together. What I did feel like a year later was that I cleared the way for people who were in their predominant performance and material life force to almost have a play space to create wreck and ruin. So there were marches that were life-threatening and demonstrations and trying to work toward a balance where we're looking for that caring life force from the government at the very least, you know, like, or material life force. So the protections that were in place, we still have the virus, but what we don't have is eviction protection. What we don't have is, you know, a check in the mail for somebody who lost their job, but it's not as if people are back at work. We haven't recovered economically, and Jeff Bezos is going to space. So I don't know, I think about those three colors, you know, like red, green, and yellow. And I wonder about how a caring life force people who are in the healing professions may even have, you know, have been plagued to the point of exhaustion at this point, like a lot of other people who are working remotely every hour and no longer have an office to go to. but I'm beginning to feel like this year's got to look different from last year. And thinking about it in terms of purpose, you know, I mean, in 39, when it was hard for the country, what was it? The WPA was there. And instead of, you know, like the men that we now call, you know, like have white privilege or whatever, but they were material life force. They needed to protect, they needed to provide shelter and food and bridges and fix dams. And they were given purpose. And I think that there would be less OxyContin and overdoses and suicide and abuse, you know, if there were a recognition of the need for the needs for the primarily material and purpose, you know, driven, but also for me, purpose is not just material, of course, but that my performance, I realize I have performance life force in how it is that I care. I play and I make contact. It's incredibly important for me as a therapist, and that I've been told to stay at home and not make eye contact that's real with people in a tile. I'm becoming very angry about it because I want to know why I'm not a first line. Why aren't I a first responder? I mean, the mental health crisis has gone unrespected because it's carrying on, but it's not saving physical lives. People are taking their own lives, but it's nobody's asking me to come to the front line. I want to be called to the front line. I want to risk in order to help. And I'm being told to basically feel toothless in all of this in order to hang on to my license and to care. And I just am in a state that's fine. I'm fine. At least I have some life force I can feel, you know, around this. And that was what I was thinking while you were talking. And also that I am, like in 9/11, you know, the therapists in the States, and especially closer to like in New York, were going through the same thing at the same time as their clients. So there was nobody who was outside that could hold a hand and have one foot in, one foot out. We were all in it together. And I'm aware that the burnout is there for us to care for ourselves and our clients and each other. And each other is something that concerns me a lot about carrying life force, which is that if it's professional, I see less care being shown to colleagues than, you know, like the DA with, I mean, the prosecutor or whatever. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or at opposite, they have a martini, you know, after a day's work. And there isn't that feeling of morale. And I don't know, no, I don't mean that. Feels very scary. It feels like a scary time. And I am suspicious of being asked to sit again in shelter in place. Makes me feel scared for what's happening with people who have different life forces other than a carrying life force. I'm worried that the Nazis are coming again. Totally triggered. That's my share.
Yeah, I think the life forces are really relevant here because I feel our field of work will get crazily pulled into material life force. You know, your license, and you mustn't use your license, and not you to lose your license. You've got to follow those rules. And I feel there's not, I'd almost say, you know, we're ending in a moment, but we'll be following up on this Wednesday and next Sunday. But I almost feel there's a way, there's in our field, there's not a healthy performance life force. There's a healthy performance life force would say, you know, our field of work has this to offer, and we're going to take some risks around it.
Yeah.
But then the governing body
It's just
sitting somewhere is going to come along and say, well, you couldn't do that because of boundaries and countertransference.
right.
And it's like,
So I can't follow a client who's moved out of state, for Christ's sake?
I mean, and that's material life force. It's nothing but protecting control and money. And, you know, we could, and, you know, as the people who are here right at the beginning of the forum, that's why I put on the forum, and that's why I recorded them, because I felt that the people who were providing the physical side of caring were taking all sorts of risks. And people on my side were taking none.
Yeah.
You know, the theory of boundaries and transference and countertransference has to come before COVID. Hello? So anyway, that's my critical bit, which years and years ago I had to be very careful how I used. But I think within the realms of what we're presenting today, and just finishing up this recording, I think we can say, if we get the life forces sorted out, those of us who are in the caring professions, and maybe the non-medical side of the caring profession, can provide a different service, because we can take some risk and we can be creative about a new world. I think the whole thing about war is right. You know, if there's a war, we'd have to do something different. Group therapy came from, after the war, there were just a lot of, they were all men then, a lot of men who needed therapy. And a doctor had all these guys in his waiting room. He said, what if we all meet together? Okay. So, you know, I think we could be more creative about how we deliver what we deliver. But the material side of things, with the bureaucracies, you know, become incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Incredibly powerful. Okay. So, having said that, well, the bureaucracies become incredibly powerful. If we can combine purpose and the life forces, I think we can find ways that we can be creative and take risks. Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm in Norfolk in England. We'll go the other way. Mary?
Mary in Rosarito Beach at just after 11:30.
Okay. Going up the coast tomorrow?
Tomorrow in San Francisco.
Okay. Elizabeth?
Elizabeth in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay. Cynthia?
Cynthia, Kankakee, Illinois, and it's 1:30.
Okay, Nikki, coming back across the ocean.
Yeah, linking it back to the beginning of again. Nikki, Wimbledon, London, 7:30 p.m.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming, and I hope to see you on Wednesday. Be examples of life forces. See what we can do with them. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.